that leads to rebirth in the third level. And then if one develops the fourth jhana, that leads to rebirth in the at the fourth level.
I had a technical question about the actual practice of Brahma Viharas.
Yeah.
So my understanding of metta, loving kindness, is that you start with a person, and so the sensations of the body feels like it's sort of like you are exuding some sort of, I don't know, molecule.
Exuding.
It's a sensation of the body, sensation of the feeling in the body feels like it's kind of permeating something out of your body, like exuding some kind of molecule.
Okay, so you feel like you're exuding some kind of...
So throughout the whole, and then the whole environment, and then you imagine it going to the world. And the only thing that I was kind of question was about compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion seems to, the way I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, the way I was taught was to actually feel the other person's suffering.
Yeah, right.
So, and actually, so in a way, seems that compassion is kind of a two-way. I have to kind of feel what the other person is feeling, and then I have to kind of wish the end of that suffering. Am I correct in assuming the two-step? Or how do you understand that practice of compassion?
Okay, so one feels the other person's suffering, and then one wishes for the end of that suffering.
Right.
I think in developing the pure, concentrated meditation on compassion, one feels this, one focuses on feeling the suffering of that person. But it's not that you undergo the suffering.
Yeah.
But it's because when you sort of relate to the other person in terms of that person's suffering, it's not like you're being weighed down by misery, sorrow, grief, but rather what's arising is, I don't know how to express it otherwise, compassion, the quality of the mind or heart that shakes with the suffering of others, or that feels the suffering of others as one's own. So at that point, when one is treating it meditatively, one is not generating the wish, may that person be free from their suffering. But generally what is done at the end of a meditation on compassion, when one comes out from it, then one generates the wish, may that person or those persons be free from their suffering.
So am I correct to understand that it's kind of uninvolved, kind of detached receptivity when I'm doing the feeling?
Wait, the sound is blurred.
Am I kind of, in a way, can I describe it as kind of an uninvolved, kind of detached receptivity that I'm feeling when I'm taking in this feeling of suffering from another person?
I didn't get the phrase. It sounded like Tiffany.
No, it's kind of uninvolved, detached receptivity.
Oh, receptivity. Receptivity.
So that I am kind of open and yet I'm detached from this suffering, so I don't get involved or get the mishigas, get so attached to that suffering.
This is what I would say, when one is developing compassion as a meditation, then one is, that's a good choice of words, then one is developing a receptivity to the suffering of others. But I mean, the way I understand it, it doesn't mean that one just remains in one's day-to-day life completely detached from the suffering of others. Then I would call that, could even be a pseudo-compassion, but it has to manifest in some concern to alleviate the suffering of others. Then it becomes a real, what I call real down-to-earth compassion. But within the meditative state, when doing the meditative practice, at that point, one is sort of becoming receptive to the suffering of others. One is not thinking and devising plans for alleviating the suffering of others. That could come after the meditation, sort of drawing the force of the meditation on compassion, and then using it to find ways to apply one's effort and energy to help alleviate the suffering of others. Okay, we'll take one more question, then I want to go do a brief look at the suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya. Claudia.
Actually, not a question, just I love the word that you used, and I suspect it's a translation issue. You said you shake with the suffering, and I think what came to mind for me is resonate, almost like an instrument.
Actually, resonate is also a good word. The Pali word that's used is anukampa, which means, anu means along with, and kampa means shaking. So it's shaking. This is another word that's used in the suttas oft to indicate compassion. Anukampa means shaking along with the suffering of others. And these two words actually, the different words indicate different aspects of compassion. When the Buddha explains the meditation on compassion, he uses the word karuna, which is what we simply translate as compassion. I don't remember the verbal origins of it, but when the Buddha often speaks about anukampang upadaya, acting out of compassion, and there we should understand that this is compassion turned into an active virtue, taking action to alleviate the suffering of others. So the meditative state is karuna, but compassion put into action is anukampa. That is through the shaking or resonating with the suffering of others, one then takes action to alleviate their suffering. Okay, I want to take a quick overview of the suttas from Anguttara Nikaya. It used to be so easy when I was young. I would be able to look at an audience and look at my paper with the same pair of eyes. Now I have to turn into a six-eyed monster. Okay, so this comes to the question that Michael asked earlier. So we have 4 kinds of persons found existing in the world. Though actually the main contrast is actually between 2 types of people. So here we have some person dwells pervading 1 quarter with a mind of loving kindness, and so on, extending loving kindness to the whole world. Okay, now he relishes it, desires it, and finds satisfaction in it. So a kind of subtle attachment is developing to that liberation of mind by loving kindness. So if he is firm in it, steady in it, resolved on it, he often dwells in it, and he has not lost it when he dies, then he is reborn in companionship with the devas of Brahma's company. Or in other words, he's reborn in the Brahma world. Now the lifespan of those devas is an aeon. It's an extremely long period. If we use modern cosmology, we put a present stage of development from the Big Bang is said to be 13 billion years. Suppose another 13 billion, and the period of collapse. It's 13 plus 13, 26, 52 billion years. Okay, so the worldling remains there all his life, and when he has completed the full lifespan of those deities, then it says he goes to hell, to the animal realm, or the sphere of afflicted spirits. Actually, according to the commentary, one doesn't get reborn directly from the Brahma world into the lower realms, but one goes from the Brahma world back into the human world. But then in the human world, one might do unwholesome actions that can lead to rebirth in the lower realms. But in any case, the worldling who develops the divine abodes, who develops the Brahma viharas, can be reborn in the Brahma world, but then he can take rebirth in lower realms without advancing. But the Buddha's disciple remains there all his life, and when he has completed the entire lifespan of the devas, he attains final liberation in that same state of existence. So that's the distinction, the difference between the instructed noble disciple and the uninstructed worldling with regard to future destiny and rebirth. Okay, the other passages just develop the same point with regard to the meditations on compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. So we don't have to go into those. But we see here that there's a contrast between, it seems, between a worldling who doesn't have any access to the Buddha's teaching and one who is already a noble disciple, who maybe has gained first, second, or third stages of enlightenment, and then goes on and progresses to final liberation without taking rebirth elsewhere. So there's still a certain dark continent here, or a gray area, which is an earnest follower of the Buddha Dharma who doesn't attain, who achieves the Brahmaviharas, the liberation of mind, through Brahmaviharas as a human being, but doesn't achieve even the first stage of enlightenment. And so this person will get reborn in the Brahma world, and the question is, can this person advance further, or do they just get sucked up in, the bliss of the Brahma realm and then take a lower rebirth elsewhere? My understanding is, and this is my own personal understanding, that if a person has learned the Dhamma well as a human being and has a good understanding of the Dhamma without reaching any realization of any stage of deep penetration, if they get reborn in the Brahma world, they'll still have that right view. And they'll still have the other factors of the practice, of the path. So once they're reborn in the Brahma world, they could still pick up their practice where they left off and continue to develop, and then to develop deeper and deeper insight, and then even gain these stages, the paths and the fruits in the Brahma world. That's my personal opinion. Oh, I haven't been getting questions from the internet, I see. Okay, somebody says, does this mean that we should practice the 4 divine abodes before moving into insight? I say definitely not. I say it's best to practice the 2 in conjunction. Even if one hasn't reached, it's not the case that you have to develop Brahmavihara to the level of jhana first, then develop insight. But the most beneficial practice, I think, is to combine some practice of insight meditation with some practice of loving kindness or compassion meditation, and bring them together in harmony. That's a quick answer. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to go through this in a bit of a rushed manner. Okay, the next sutta, again, takes 4 types of persons found existing in the world. Okay, here we take a person who develops the mind of loving kindness, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then this person who develops the mind of boundless loving kindness then contemplates all of the phenomena that are included in form, feeling, perception, volitional activities, and consciousness as impermanent, suffering, disease, and so forth, as empty and as non-self. Then with the breakup of the body after death, this person is born in companionship with the devas of the pure abodes. That's the point. That person, because he has insight, this will be a person who develops that insight up to the point of non-returning. I think in taking excerpts, I might have missed out some essential passages there. Okay, a similar thing is said about developing the other 3 Brahmaviharas. Okay, the next sutta speaks about the Buddha's encouraging the monks to do deeds of merit, and then he explains how in a past life He himself had practiced the meditation of loving kindness for 7 years, and then as a result of that, for 7 aeons of world dissolution and evolution, he did not come back to this world, this human world, but he went on to rebirth in the realm of streaming radiance. That's one of the high celestial realms. And then later he was reborn in the Brahma world, and he became Mahabrahma, the great deity. And then after that, hundreds of times, he was a wheel-turning monarch, and so on. So this is showing the worldly benefits of developing the mind of loving kindness. Some of the passages you can read on your own. They should be clear from the explanation I've been giving in class. But I just want to come to the next to last one on page 4 of the handout, the benefits of loving kindness. So this is explaining the benefits of loving kindness when it's developed purely as a mundane meditation, just in itself without insight. So these are some of the day-to-day or mundane benefits. It doesn't silence gongs. May Mr. Wang be well and happy. May all of his good purposes be fulfilled. May Mr. Wang be well and happy. May all of his good purposes be fulfilled. May Mr. Wang, or whoever is hitting the gong, be well and happy. May all of his good purposes be fulfilled. May Mr. Wang be well and happy. Ah, it works. I guess I hadn't tried hard enough. Okay, so in this sutta, the Buddha mentions 11 benefits. One sleeps well, sleeps peacefully. One wakes up happily. One doesn't have bad dreams. One is pleasing to other people, so other people like one. And one is pleasing to spirits, so the other spirits that are around are happy with one. Then the deities protect one. Maybe modern skeptics don't believe this, but there are other beings in other realms close to the human realm that are invisible to us. And so if one develops loving kindness, they will protect us in times of danger, when there's some kind of tragedy or catastrophe. Suddenly there comes like an invisible intercession on our behalf that's coming from the deity. Then it said this is for those who have really developed very powerful samadhi on loving kindness, that fire, poisons, and weapons do not injure one. Then in the commentaries relate some stories about to exemplify this. Then 8, one's mind becomes quickly concentrated. So if one practices, because one of the big obstacles to samadhi is ill will, anger, and resentment. So if one practices loving kindness, one can suppress that anger, ill will, and resentment. And so with that hindrance of ill will out of the way, one can more easily achieve samadhi. Then one's facial complexion or one's facial features are serene. You could see a person practices loving kindness, they have a pleasant smile on the face always looks bright and cheerful, and one is attracted to such a person because they look very their facial features gives a kind of comfort, like one feels peaceful in their presence. Then when death comes, one dies unconfused because one has a clear, loving mind at the time of death. And then if one does not penetrate further, then one goes on to the Brahma world. So if one doesn't have insight or wisdom, let's say if one, I think if one does not penetrate further, this means if one hasn't yet reached arhatship, because even a non-returner can go on to the Brahma world through loving kindness. But if one has arhatship, then one doesn't take rebirth anywhere, and so one is completely liberated. Okay, so these are 11 mundane benefits of loving kindness. And of course, the supramundane benefit is that based on loving kindness, one can develop the insight that brings final liberation. And then another sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya gives another benefit or mundane benefit of loving kindness. Or maybe it's implied amongst the 11. Anyway, this is an additional benefit that the Buddha taught the development of loving kindness for monks who are practicing meditation in the forest, to develop loving kindness towards what are called the 4 families of snakes. Maybe these were 4 types of snakes, poisonous snakes in northern India during the Buddha's time. But one could just think of any kind of snakes, especially poisonous snakes, and develop loving kindness towards them. Because when there's very powerful loving kindness towards the snakes or other types of harmful animals and other creatures, somehow those animals will pick up the loving vibrations of that person's mind, and they won't harm that person. And so there are many stories, not only in the Buddhist texts, the commentaries, but even I've heard them from, in modern times, of monks who've practiced loving kindness. Sometimes they're practicing in a cave, someplace in the wilderness. I remember there was a German monk in Sri Lanka. His name was Venerable Jnana Vimala. He lived a very secluded, meditative life. And he was practicing meditation someplace in a cave. And then, while he was practicing, a bear came into the cave. Bears can be very ferocious, especially if one has taken over their own dwelling place, their own abode. So first, when he saw that the bear come into the cave, he said that his mind was really frightened. He didn't know what to do. What do I do? And suddenly he thought, okay, there's no other way to deal with this bear. But he had previously practiced a lot of the loving kindness meditation, so he just sat down and started practicing loving kindness towards the bear. Then the bear turned around and walked out of the cave. And then he was able to make his exit. And I've heard of monks and ascetics who practice loving kindness, and tigers come and don't harm them. And sometimes even when he's sitting in loving kindness, sitting and practicing loving kindness, the tiger will come and sort of cuddle up to him, nuzzle up to him, and purring right by his knee, like, please pet me, just like a little pussycat. And there was another monk in Sri Lanka who had been sitting in meditation out in the open. I think it was a cobra or a pulanga, one of these poisonous snakes, came up into his lap and sort of coiled up in the lap that's formed when one is sitting in meditation. And he just, extended loving kindness towards that snake. And the snake remained for some time, but then after some time just it unwound itself and it moved away. And during my first few months in Sri Lanka as a monk, I was just about to get into bed. I think I must have had a little light on, and I noticed, you see, the mattress of the bed it was on an elevated surface, and there was an open space between between the mattress and the wall. And I looked, just somehow my eyes alighted upon that space, and I saw there was a snake in that space. And I didn't know what kind of snakes there were in Sri Lanka, but I made the assumption that this might be a poisonous snake. And so I tried reciting blessings. It didn't move. I tried meditating on loving kindness. It didn't move. And this must have been about 10:30 at night. And down the hill, you see, I was living on the sort of quite a desolate hillside. I had a kuti, or a little cottage there. And down the hill, there were some villagers living. And there was a villager named Somapala, who often used to come up to help me. And so I was looking, I'm reciting the Buddha's name, it's not moving. I'm invoking the blessings of the triple gem, it's not moving. I'm meditating on loving kindness, it's not moving. I'm getting tired. I want to go to sleep. And I don't want to risk sleeping alongside that snake. So finally, in the dead of night, I go outside the kuti and I yell, Somapala, Somapala. And then 2 or 3 minutes later, Somapala comes into the kuti. I point to the bed and say, there's a snake there. He looks and he says, oh, Mapala, very dangerous. You know the Mapala snake? It's not a big snake, it's rather small, thin, but apparently very dangerous. And so he takes the broom, sweeps the snake off the bed, and sweeps it out of the kuti. And so I could go to bed safe and sound. But I was just a young monk. Today, if there were a Mapala by my bed, probably I would have to take the broom and sweep it off. Okay, so let's end with a quick sharing of the merits. I'll do it in the abridged way. Akasata chabumata deva naga mihitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mihitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mihitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya Bhavagupadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapanna rupya rupicha sanya sanyino dukkha pamuchantu posantu nibuting. Okay, next Saturday we won't have the class because I won't be here next Saturday. So the next class will be in 2 weeks, that is, I think it's June 29th. And I think we do, but look on the schedule, I think we take Sutta number 101 next time. But look on this sequence of suttas posted on the schedule. And we'll send out an announcement before the class. Okay, and then we'll come back, let us say 12:15, and we can have further discussion and question and answer? Okay, so let us end with 3 bows to the Buddha.